Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. In the next 10 minutes, I'll be giving you all the info you need for Topaz Rerun Guide. I'll be talking about her best relic, Lightcones, team comp, rotations, pros and cons, and if you should pull for her, you can sit back and relax. Please leave a like and subscribe, it helps a ton as I'm trying to reach 1,000 subscribers by next month. Here are her required materials and skill priority. For an overview of her kit, she has the fire element and comes from the path of hunt. Topaz is a 2-in-1 DPS plus follow-up attack buffer. Her whole kit is based on dealing follow-up attack damage. For her Eidolons, E1, when enemies afflicted with proof of debt receive follow-up attacks, they will take 50% crit damage. This only applies to FUA units. Pretty good stop point with a 17% DPS boost. E2, after Numby takes action and launches an attack, Topaz regenerates 5 energy. E4, after Numby's turn begins, Topaz's action is advanced forward by 20%. E6, Numby's attack count during the Windfall Bonanza state increases by 1, and its fire respan increases by 10%. For her best price to performance ratio, she's totally E0 sufficient, but if you are a light whale E1 and signature LC at max, E2 is seriously not needed. How to build Topaz. For the body, you want crit damage, and for the boots, you want speed or attack percent based on your relic luck. Now for the substat priority. You only want 135 speed on Topaz. Not 134 as your other DPS units may be at 134 speed since you want Topaz to go before them. One issue with speed boots is that Topaz has 110 base speed, and with speed boots she will get a total of 135 speed. Here is what your ideal stat should look like for Topaz, but for players who can't hit above 140% crit damage, fear not, as with attack percent boots it performs the same as a 170% crit damage build with speed boots. The reason is that Topaz DPS output for attack and crit damage is 1-to-1 as long as you have 140% crit damage at minimum, where attack percent can even be saturated. Overall, these two builds are the average S-tier relics on Topaz for most players, where it comes down to the individual player's luck. Recommend players to just slap on whicher they have best and not stress out about it. Onto her relic set. Topaz best in slot is 4-piece Grand Duke. I wouldn't recommend any other sets. As for Dead Waters, you won't get the max DPS output as Topaz is only able to apply 1 debuff by herself, unless you're running both Aventurine and Doctor ratio. But even with 3 debuffs you can see that the DPS loses to 4-piece Grand Duke no matter the scenario. Overall, 4-piece Grand Duke highly recommended, since every FUA unit will need at least 2-piece Duke as their best in slot. And now for the planar ornament. Main stat, go for attack percent, and for the orb either fire damage boost or attack percent. Both will perform better than the other depending on your Lightcone options. Where may you want an S-tier attack orb over fire DMG with swordplay unless it's triple S-tier, for example. Recommend players to not discard either. Topaz has 3 planar ornament sets she can use. Shockingly inert Salsodo has the lowest DPS, but crit rate is insanely hard to build, where it's almost impossible to hit above 60% crit rate. I recommend players to just farm for whichever set is more universal for your account, as with Space Sealing Station and Glamoth hitting that 60% plus crit rate is insanely hard. Where in the end it all comes down to substats for any relic set. Also, don't go for 160 speed for Glamoth even if you have Ruan Mei, as your total stat for attack and crit damage will make Topaz perform way worse compared to Salsodo. After all, high-speed Topaz is honestly pretty bad now, due to more FUA units which will trigger Numby's action instead. Now for new players with Swordplay S5, the new crit damage relic set will be the best for you, which gives almost 9% DPS boost compared to any other relics. But for all players, keep in mind that you should only farm the most universal set where most of your units are using, as you may never even get a double S-tier relic set piece after farming for months. Now for her Lightcones. At last place, it's Stellar C. Only upside is that it's a free S5 and it's really easy to build Topaz with the 16% base crit rate, but with an S-tier relic this Lightcone will seriously underperform. Though wouldn't recommend this Lightcone anymore, as there are way better options now. At third place we have Sleep Like the Dead. The DPS from this Lightcone is just way higher and it doesn't have any restrictions. Highly recommended to slap this LC on for players who have gotten it from the standard banner. At second place we have 2 Lightcones. For swordplay it's only recommended at S3, at S5 its DPS output is on par Topaz signature LC. Only one minor issue with this LC is swapping targets, but not really an issue as Topaz's only job is to focus on enemy bosses. For Final Victor at S5 it's only slightly behind swordplay and there's pretty no restrictions with this Lightcone, and most importantly it's free, but some players may take months just to S5 this LC. Especially there are a ton of good Lightcones in store for other units too. At first place, it's her signature LC. Increases crit rate by 18% and follow-up attack damage by 30%. After Topaz attacks with a follow-up attack, increase all allies' crit damage dealt by 24%. Overall it's a decent LC with a 100% uptime, but it still loses to her E1 where it's not worth 90 pulls. Even if this LC works outside of FUA teams, but let's be real, no one uses Topaz outside of FUA teams as it beats the main purpose of pulling for her. Here are the LC calculations. Overall I recommend F2P players to slap on swordplay at S5 even with the conditional effect, as Topaz's main job is to only target enemy bosses. If players do not have it, Final Victor S5 is really good where the DPS difference wouldn't affect your MOC 12 runs compared to her signature LC. And now for her team comp, rotations and how her ability works. Her best teams will always be with units which can do follow-up attacks. Topaz always wants to go before your secondary FUA unit. She's also a single target unit where it's preferred to have your secondary FUA unit deal AoE damage. You can run Doctor Ratio with Topaz, but it's honestly mid as we will be running 2 single target DPS units where you will struggle a lot with AoE content. With Doctor Ratio by himself in a standard team comp it does the same or more DPS compared to Topaz in the same team. But if you want to run Topaz with Ratio, it's ideal that you have Rerun Mei and Topaz with either E1 or S1, better with both. For Topaz pros and cons, pros. S tier, 2-in-1 unit DPS plus buffer. Core unit. Has potential with more FUA units in future which can increase her tier list, for example Aventurine. Can be SP positive. She has the best ass in the game. Great for simulated universe. Elation is one of the best path. Cons. She does poorly by herself. Not F2P friendly, as you have to pull more units for her to do well. Not ideal to pull for fire element coverage. With Sam or Firefly coming out, you can expect Topaz ranking in the tier list to drop. Archetype isn't needed. Pulling for her is like trying to make a weak unit strong, for example Jingyuan, where most players regret pulling for him. Too many good units coming out. Robin's kit based on speculations looks pretty good and maybe on par or better than Rerun Mei. So should you pull for Topaz? These are the 2 deciding factors. If you like her design and the FUA playstyle, yes. If you're planning to pull Topaz just for fire element coverage, no. She will definitely get outscaled in terms of DPS hugely. Overall Topaz is a good unit but not insanely good where it's an easy pass for her. It really all comes to you liking her design or not to pull for her. And that's it for this guide.